Brothers, sisters, today we celebrating Buddha's teaching. 2,936 years ago, Buddha Shakyamuni taught Dharma, Four Noble Truths, at Varanasi, India. Since then, many great masters and many practitioners practice Dharma. Because of that, many sentient beings became enlightened beings, and many enlightened beings become Buddha. We are holding this lineage and studying and practicing right here. Therefore, we ask David from Los Angeles, man, teach Dharma to us.
Thank you, Kenpo. This talk is called Thinking, Time, and the Gap. And this talk is to address a misconception that some people seem to have about thinking. And before I go on, I'm going to mention that to understand what's going on with this talk, you might need a little bit of background information about what we refer to as single present moment thinking. There are a number of other videos in this collection which cover that topic, including a very able one by Eric Young, which was recorded just a few minutes ago. Anyway, there's a lot of information there on the subject for you. I'm not going to be delving into that too deeply. Okay, here's what it's about. Some of you may have some kind of meditation practice, and you may practice some kind of calming meditation. Maybe it's shamatha, maybe it's something that goes by another name. If you're like me, when you get on the cushion, you discover that you have a lot of thoughts. When I sit down on the cushion, I often find that I have what seems to be a solid wall of thoughts. I mean, it's ridiculous. I once actually wrote down, to the best of my ability, what seemed to be the sequence, and they were just all jammed together. It was something like, you know, I need to get those estimated tax payments in. Hey, I think it's Pauline's birthday next week. Huh, maybe I'll get Thai food for lunch today. Wait a minute, is it already Wednesday? We've got that conference call at 3. Maybe I don't have time for Thai food. Huh, what about Pauline's birthday? And so on. And it's like, I just, and there's no space. There's no, just, you know, nothing. Once in a great while, once in a blue moon, I do find that I calm down enough that, you know, there's a little bit of space in between those thoughts. Calms down enough that, you know, maybe in between the, oh my God, it's Wednesdays, there seems to be a little room to breathe. Now, I've encountered in other traditions where they talk about a gap in one's thinking and being aware of the gap. And I find that people can misconstrue what this gap idea means. If by a gap you're talking about maybe getting a little room to breathe in between the, oh my God, is it already Wednesdays? Then great, no problem there. But when people talk about a gap in thinking, you have to understand that when we talk about thinking, we're using the term technically. When we say thinking, we're talking about single present moment thinking, which is, again, where I'm referring you back to some of the other videos in this collection. And for us, there could not be such a thing as a gap in single present moment thinking. It actually leads us to absurdities. Now, I think that some people might think of the idea of a gap in thinking, meaning that you should try to stop your thinking. This is a completely mistaken idea for a couple of reasons. One is that you never possibly could. It can't be done. Until you become Buddha, each single present moment thinking is reincarnating into the next one, and so on. It doesn't stop. On top of that, if you somehow could stop it, then you would actually you'd be shooting yourself in the foot. You would not be able to practice positive thinking, you would not be able to become Buddha, you'd really be in trouble. So be very glad that you can't do it. But putting that aside, this notion of stopping thinking, this idea of a gap in single present moment thinking, and I'll just briefly review, single present moment thinking is responsible for all that you experience, it's all your phenomena, and so on. What would a gap mean? I'm going to look at my notes. So, if thinking somehow, you know, if you stopped thinking, oh no, forget it. Never mind about stopping thinking. Let's imagine that there is a gap in your thinking, and I'm assuming that this is a temporal gap. And you know, in other words, that there's some bit of time that elapses between thinkings, and that you are somehow able to experience this gap. Now, based on what we've been saying about thinking, I don't know how you could experience such a gap without thinking. So there would be this gap in between your thinkings, which you're then experiencing, which means that you'd be throwing more thinking into that gap, which means that you've just filled it in with more thinking, and it isn't a gap anymore. So there's an absurdity there. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, we have to now take something else into account, which is that for us, single present moment thinking equals time. Time and single present moment thinking are one and the same. And I found that when I talk about this and I harp on it, people don't, I had trouble absorbing that they truly are synonymous. They are coextensive. No, you know, thinking is time, time is thinking, no time, no thinking. They are one and the same, they are exactly the same thing. The terms refer to the same thing. I know I'm being repetitive here, but again, for some reason, it's hard to absorb. Okay, so we've got that they're one and the same thing. In particular, it's not like one is a quality of the other. Each denotes the same thing. Okay. Now, if they're the same, and if there could be a gap in between thinkings, then what would that mean? In other words, if there is some time in between thinkings, and if thinking is time, then that would mean that there's, yet again, more thinking in between those thinkings. So yet again, you would have filled in the gap. So either way, this notion leads to an absurdity. It just doesn't make sense. You just can't do it. So the gap is impossible. Okay, so where does this leave us? Well, first of all, there cannot possibly be a gap in between single present moment thinking. It couldn't happen. Stopping thinking is a horrendously bad idea. Be very glad that you can't actually do it, if that's how you were to take that teaching. If a gap in your thinking means calming down and finding a little space in between, oh my God, it's Wednesdays, then great. That's it.